Silence becomes uncomfortable around a female empath because she notices the emotions most people try to hide. A man can smile in front of her while carrying anger, guilt, insecurity, or emotional distance deep inside, and somehow she still feels it without a single word being spoken. That is why many men become attracted to female empaths in the beginning, but slowly start pulling away once they realize they are standing in front of someone who can see beyond the mask they show to the world. Most men say they want a loyal woman, a loving woman, a woman who truly understands them. But the truth becomes very different when they finally meet a woman whose emotional awareness is so deep that even small lies begin to feel exposed. A female empath is not difficult because she creates chaos. She becomes difficult for emotionally immature people because she notices patterns, emotional shifts, fake energy, and hidden intentions long before anyone else does. She pays attention to the tone behind the words, the coldness behind the affection, and the silence behind the excuses. And for many men, that level of emotional depth feels overwhelming. Psychology studies around emotional intelligence continue to show that highly empathetic people process emotional signals more intensely than average individuals, which is why relationships with empaths often become emotionally powerful but also emotionally challenging when honesty and consistency are missing. Female empaths absorb the emotional energy around them like a sponge. Stress affects them deeply. Negativity drains them quickly. Love changes them completely. Betrayal wounds them in ways most people never fully understand. That is why relationships with female empaths can feel intense from the very beginning. They do not love halfway. They do not connect on the surface. They crave emotional safety, emotional honesty, and real connection, and many men are simply not prepared for that level of emotional intimacy. Some men mistake her sensitivity for weakness, but what they fail to realize is that empathy often comes with emotional strength that takes years of pain to develop. Many female empaths spent years learning how to read people because life forced them to become emotionally aware for survival. And that hidden truth changes everything once you truly understand it. In this video, you will learn the real reasons why so many men struggle to handle female empaths, why emotional depth scares emotionally unavailable people, why empathy exposes hidden behavior, and why many men only recognize the value of an empath after they lose her completely. Some of these reasons are rarely discussed openly because they reveal uncomfortable truths about modern relationships, emotional immaturity, and the fear many people carry when they are truly seen for who they are. By the end of this video, you may understand female empaths in a completely different way and perhaps even recognize behaviors that silently destroy relationships without people noticing it at first. So stay with us until the end because the final reason explains the one trait that makes female empaths unforgettable once they walk away from someone's life. Welcome to the channel, where we explore deep psychology, human behavior, relationships, and the hidden emotional truths most people ignore. If you enjoy thoughtful videos like this, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. A female empath notices emotional changes long before other people do. That is one of the biggest reasons many men struggle to handle her. Around most people, a man can hide frustration behind a smile, pretend everything is fine, or avoid difficult emotions without being questioned too deeply. But around a female empath, emotional distance becomes visible almost immediately. She notices the late replies that suddenly feel cold. She notices when eye contact changes. She notices when affection becomes forced instead of natural. Even tiny shifts in tone become loud signals to her because female empaths are extremely sensitive to emotional energy. Many people think empathy is only about being kind or emotional, but deep empathy is also connected to observation. Female empaths spend years learning how to read people, often because painful experiences force them to become emotionally aware at an early age. They learn to study behavior instead of just listening to words. That is why small lies feel enormous around them. A simple "I'm fine" can sound emotionally heavy when the energy behind the words feels empty. A female empath may stay quiet at first, but internally she already senses that something has changed. This creates a powerful emotional tension in relationships because many men are not used to being emotionally seen so clearly. Some men become uncomfortable because they realize they cannot fully hide their intentions around her. Others become defensive because they feel exposed without understanding why. A female empath may not even accuse someone directly, yet her awareness alone can make emotionally distant people nervous. That is because emotional dishonesty creates tension around people who naturally sense emotional truth. Studies connected to emotional intelligence often show that highly empathetic individuals are more sensitive to facial expressions, tone changes, silence, and behavioral inconsistencies. In relationships, this means female empaths often notice emotional withdrawal before the other person even admits it to themselves. She can sense when someone is emotionally checking out. She notices when conversations lose warmth. She notices when affection becomes mechanical instead of genuine. And this becomes difficult for people who are used to avoiding emotional accountability. Many men want understanding, but they do not always want to be emotionally transparent. A female empath unintentionally challenges that because her presence pushes emotional truth to the surface. Sometimes a man may think he is hiding stress, resentment, guilt, or emotional confusion successfully, but the empath quietly feels it anyway, and that can feel terrifying for someone who has spent years hiding behind emotional walls. The strange part is that female empaths are usually not trying to control anyone. They are simply deeply connected to emotional patterns. Their nervous system reacts strongly to emotional shifts around them. Silence affects them, tension affects them, negative energy affects them. That is why many empaths become emotionally exhausted in unstable relationships. They constantly absorb emotional signals that other people ignore. Over time, this creates emotional fatigue because they are carrying both their own emotions and the emotions hidden inside the relationship itself. A female empath may start overthinking because she senses distance but receives verbal reassurance that everything is okay. That emotional contradiction slowly becomes painful. Words and energy stop matching, and for an empath, inconsistency is one of the loudest emotional alarms possible. Many men misunderstand this completely. They think she is being too sensitive or overanalyzing small behavior changes, but often the empath is reacting to emotional inconsistencies that are genuinely there. She notices the emotional silence behind the words. She notices the coldness behind the compliments. She notices when attention feels forced instead of natural. You may fool everyone else, but an empath notices the silence behind your words. That is why emotionally unavailable men often struggle around female empaths. Emotional avoidance becomes difficult when someone keeps sensing what is hidden underneath. Some men begin to feel emotionally trapped because the empath keeps asking questions they are not comfortable answering honestly. Others pull away because emotional closeness feels overwhelming once they realize the empath expects emotional openness instead of surface-level interaction. And this leads directly into another reason many men struggle with female empaths. Surface-level relationships are not enough for her. A female empath craves emotional depth in a world that often rewards emotional performance instead of emotional honesty. She does not feel satisfied by shallow conversations that only stay on the surface. Small talk drains her after a while because she wants to understand the real person hiding underneath the image people show to the world. Many men initially find this attractive because deep emotional attention feels comforting in the beginning. A female empath listens carefully. She remembers emotional details. She genuinely cares about what someone feels inside. But later, some men become overwhelmed once they realize her emotional depth is constant. She asks meaningful questions because she wants emotional intimacy, not emotional entertainment. She wants to know what someone fears, what someone hides, what someone regrets, and what someone truly feels when nobody else is around. That level of emotional closeness can become uncomfortable for people who spent years emotionally disconnected from themselves. Modern relationships often stay trapped at the level of attraction, routine, and distraction. Many people know how to flirt, but they do not know how to communicate emotional truth. Many people know how to create temporary chemistry, but they struggle to create emotional safety. A female empath notices this difference quickly. She notices when conversations never go deeper than surface topics. She notices when someone changes the subject every time emotions become serious. She notices when vulnerability is avoided completely. Emotionally unavailable men often feel exhausted by this because they are not prepared for the emotional openness the empath seeks naturally. A female empath does not want endless perfection. She wants emotional honesty. That is what many men fail to understand. She does not expect someone to never make mistakes. She does not expect someone to always say the perfect thing. What she truly wants is emotional authenticity. She wants words and feelings to match. She wants communication that feels real instead of rehearsed. That becomes difficult for emotionally immature people because emotional depth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels dangerous to people who learn to survive by emotionally shutting down. Many men are taught from a young age to hide emotions, suppress vulnerability, and avoid emotional openness because society often connects emotional expression with weakness. Over time, this creates emotional distance even inside relationships. A female empath unintentionally breaks through that emotional distance because she naturally moves toward emotional connection instead of away from it. She asks questions most people avoid. She wants conversations that reveal the real person underneath the confidence, the image, and the emotional defenses. Some men love this at first because it feels rare to be understood deeply. But later, it starts feeling emotionally intense because deep connection also exposes emotional wounds people were trying to hide. A female empath often becomes the mirror emotionally unavailable people secretly fear. She reflects hidden insecurities back to them without even trying. This creates tension because emotional depth forces people to confront emotions they usually escape through distraction, ego, work, or emotional avoidance. She does not want perfect words. She wants emotional truth. And emotional truth becomes difficult for people who spent their entire lives hiding from it. Some men slowly withdraw because the empath asks for emotional consistency they cannot provide. Others become defensive because deep conversations make them feel emotionally exposed. The empath may simply ask, "What are you really feeling?" And suddenly the emotional atmosphere changes completely because many people are not comfortable answering honestly. Deep emotional connection sounds beautiful in theory, but in reality it requires emotional maturity, accountability, vulnerability, and self-awareness. A female empath naturally seeks those things, which is why emotionally shallow relationships eventually leave her feeling emotionally lonely even when she is not physically alone. She can sit next to someone every day and still feel disconnected if emotional intimacy is missing. That emotional loneliness becomes painful for female empaths because connection means more to them than appearances. They would rather have one emotionally honest relationship than endless shallow attention. And this leads into another reason many men struggle with female empaths. She is extremely honest. Honesty sounds attractive until it becomes emotionally uncomfortable. Many people claim they value honesty, but only when the truth does not challenge their behavior, ego, or emotional habits. Female empaths usually value truth over emotional comfort because emotional dishonesty affects them deeply. They can feel when words are fake. They can sense when manipulation is happening. They can detect emotional games faster than most people expect. That is why many female empaths become brutally honest once trust and emotional clarity matter to them. She says what she feels because pretending emotionally drains her. She dislikes manipulation because she understands the emotional damage manipulation creates. She dislikes mind games because emotional confusion exhausts her mentally and emotionally. Around emotionally mature people, this honesty creates healthy communication and emotional safety. But around emotionally immature people, her honesty becomes intimidating. Some men feel attacked simply because the empath notices patterns they hoped would stay hidden. She notices inconsistency. She notices avoidance. She notices emotional dishonesty. And once she speaks about it openly, emotionally defensive people often become uncomfortable. A female empath may calmly explain that something feels emotionally wrong, but people who avoid accountability sometimes react with anger, defensiveness, or emotional withdrawal instead of honest communication. That is because truth becomes threatening when someone is trying to protect a false image of themselves. A female empath often values emotional transparency more than temporary comfort. She would rather face painful truth than comfortable lies. That mindset becomes difficult for people who rely on emotional avoidance to maintain relationships. Many men are used to relationships where difficult emotions stay hidden until problems explode later. But a female empath usually addresses emotional tension early because she already feels it growing underneath the surface. She would rather talk openly than silently suffer inside confusion. Yet emotional honesty requires courage, and not everyone is emotionally prepared for it. Some men interpret her honesty as intensity because they are not used to direct emotional communication. Others accuse her of overthinking because they do not want to confront uncomfortable truths. But female empaths usually become honest because emotional dishonesty hurts them deeply. They know what emotional manipulation feels like. They know what emotional inconsistency feels like. They know what it feels like when someone slowly changes while pretending nothing is wrong. That is why many empaths eventually become emotionally direct. They stop romanticizing mixed signals. They stop accepting emotional confusion. They stop tolerating fake communication. And emotionally immature people often struggle once the empath starts asking for emotional accountability instead of empty reassurance. One of the biggest reasons many men struggle with a female empath is because she is far more independent than people expect. Many people assume emotional women are weak, needy, or dependent, but female empaths are often emotionally strong in ways that are difficult to understand unless someone has lived through deep emotional pain themselves. Her kindness does not mean she lacks strength. Her softness does not mean she lacks self-respect. In fact, many female empaths become independent because life forced them to learn how to survive emotionally without consistent support from others. They learned how to heal themselves in silence. They learned how to carry emotional pain without asking the world to rescue them. That hidden emotional resilience becomes intimidating for controlling people because control becomes difficult when someone already knows how to stand on their own emotionally. A female empath wants partnership, not ownership. She wants emotional support, not emotional control. She wants someone who adds peace to her life instead of someone who constantly creates emotional confusion. Many men are attracted to her warmth and emotional intelligence in the beginning, but later become uncomfortable once they realize she is not willing to lose herself to maintain a relationship. She will compromise, communicate, and love deeply, but she will not destroy her self-respect just to keep someone emotionally comfortable. That becomes threatening to controlling personalities because control often depends on emotional dependence. A female empath may love deeply, but she also understands her own value after enough emotional pain. She does not beg for attention because she understands that forced love is not real love. She does not chase endlessly because she knows emotional connection should flow naturally between two emotionally mature people. She notices when effort becomes one-sided. She notices when communication becomes emotionally cold. She notices when someone enjoys receiving love but avoids giving emotional consistency in return. And once she notices these patterns repeatedly, she slowly starts emotionally detaching instead of begging to be chosen. This confuses many men because they mistake her patience for permanent tolerance. In the beginning, a female empath often gives people the benefit of the doubt. She tries to understand emotional struggles. She tries to see the good inside people even when flaws become visible. But once emotional disrespect becomes repetitive, her independence starts becoming stronger than her emotional attachment. That is when emotionally immature men begin losing control over the relationship dynamic. Many controlling men secretly want emotional power over their partner. They want someone emotionally dependent enough to tolerate inconsistent behavior, emotional neglect, or manipulation. But female empaths become dangerous to controlling personalities because empathy also creates awareness. She starts noticing patterns clearly over time. She notices when someone only shows affection after causing pain. She notices when apologies become repetitive but behavior never changes. She notices when attention is used as emotional control instead of genuine care. And once that awareness fully develops, her independence becomes emotionally untouchable. She may still feel sadness, she may still cry privately, she may still mourn the emotional connection she hoped for, but internally she starts choosing herself again. That is what many men fail to understand about female empaths. Their love is deep, but their emotional survival instinct becomes even deeper after repeated betrayal. She is not searching for someone to save her. She is searching for someone emotionally mature enough to stand beside her. That difference changes everything. She does not need constant validation to feel worthy. She does not need to be controlled to remain loyal. She simply wants emotional honesty, respect, consistency, and peace. Yet many men misinterpret this independence as emotional distance because they are used to relationships built around emotional dependence instead of emotional maturity. A female empath does not want to be emotionally owned. She wants to be emotionally understood. She wants a relationship where both people grow together instead of one person constantly shrinking to protect the other person's ego. That becomes difficult for insecure men because insecure people often feel threatened by emotionally self-aware women. Her independence silently exposes their emotional insecurities. It forces them to confront fears of inadequacy, emotional weakness, and lack of control. Some men react by becoming emotionally distant. Others react through jealousy, manipulation, or emotional games because they sense they cannot fully dominate someone who already understands her own worth. Over time, many female empaths become even more independent because repeated emotional disappointment teaches them painful lessons about people. They learn that love alone does not guarantee emotional safety. They learn that emotional connection without consistency creates emotional exhaustion. They learn that being deeply understanding does not mean tolerating disrespect forever. And slowly their independence becomes emotional protection instead of just personality. Yet underneath that strength still exists an incredibly deep emotional world. That emotional depth becomes another reason many men struggle with female empaths because she feels everything intensely. Love does not touch her lightly. Pain does not leave her quickly. Emotional energy affects her entire inner world in ways many people never fully understand. A female empath experiences emotions with powerful intensity because her emotional sensitivity is naturally heightened. Happiness affects her deeply. Sadness affects her deeply. Peace affects her deeply. Conflict affects her deeply. She absorbs emotional atmospheres like a sponge, which means the emotional energy surrounding her relationships can completely influence her emotional state. A loving environment helps her emotionally flourish. A toxic environment slowly destroys her internally. Many men underestimate how strongly emotional energy affects female empaths because not everyone experiences emotions with the same intensity. Some people can disconnect emotionally after arguments and move on quickly. Female empaths often cannot do that easily because their mind continues processing emotional tension long after the conversation ends. They replay emotional moments repeatedly. They analyze tone, words, behavior changes, and emotional inconsistencies because their emotional awareness stays active constantly. This creates emotional exhaustion when relationships become unstable. A female empath can sense negativity even when nobody openly discusses it. Silence becomes emotionally heavy for her. Cold behavior becomes emotionally loud. Fake affection becomes emotionally uncomfortable. That is why emotionally chaotic relationships drain female empaths faster than most people realize. Love feels powerful to her because she loves with her whole emotional presence. She remembers emotional details. She notices emotional needs. She gives affection with genuine intention. She listens carefully because emotional connection matters deeply to her. Many men initially feel addicted to this emotional warmth because it feels rare and comforting. Being deeply understood emotionally can feel healing in the beginning. A female empath often creates emotional safety naturally because she genuinely cares about the emotional well-being of the people she loves. But the same emotional depth that makes her love powerful also makes her pain powerful. The same heart that loves deeply also breaks deeply. Betrayal affects her intensely because emotional trust means everything to her. Lies hurt her deeply because emotional honesty is connected to safety in her mind. Emotional neglect wounds her because connection matters more to her than appearances. Some men misunderstand this emotional intensity completely. They label her as too emotional, too sensitive, or too intense simply because they are uncomfortable with emotional depth themselves. Modern culture often encourages emotional detachment as strength. People are taught to act emotionally unbothered, emotionally distant, and emotionally unavailable because vulnerability is often viewed as weakness. A female empath unintentionally challenges this emotional culture because she feels emotions openly and deeply. That intensity can overwhelm emotionally disconnected people because they are not prepared for someone who experiences love, pain, and connection at such a profound level. Many men enjoy the emotional benefits of an empath's love while avoiding the emotional responsibility required to protect her emotional world. They enjoy being understood deeply, but they struggle once they realize the empath also expects emotional maturity in return. Emotional inconsistency becomes extremely painful for female empaths because their emotional system reacts strongly to instability. Mixed signals create mental exhaustion. Hot and cold behavior creates emotional anxiety. Emotional distance creates internal confusion. Some female empaths stay in emotionally unhealthy relationships longer than they should because their empathy keeps searching for the good inside people. They keep hoping emotional consistency will return. They keep trying to heal emotional problems through understanding and patience. But over time, repeated emotional pain changes even the softest empath. That is when boundaries begin forming. At first, many female empaths give endless chances because they genuinely believe people can grow emotionally. They try to understand emotional wounds instead of immediately walking away. They forgive behavior that already hurt them because they see the pain inside others. They stay patient during emotional confusion because they want connection to survive. But repeated disrespect slowly changes their emotional behavior. Every betrayal teaches them something painful about emotional survival. Every broken promise weakens trust. Every lie creates emotional distance, and eventually the empath who once explained everything calmly begins becoming emotionally quiet instead. This transformation surprises many men because they are used to the empath constantly communicating, understanding, forgiving, and trying to fix emotional problems. They assume her patience will last forever. But emotional exhaustion changes people. A female empath may continue loving someone emotionally long after she starts silently losing trust. That is the dangerous stage many people fail to notice. Outwardly, she may still remain kind, calm, and emotionally supportive, but internally something begins shutting down slowly. Once trust repeatedly breaks, her emotional safety disappears. And without emotional safety, female empaths slowly become guarded. She starts protecting parts of herself that were once fully open. She stops over-explaining her feelings because she becomes tired of feeling unheard. She stops repeating emotional needs because repetition without change becomes emotionally humiliating after a while. The dangerous thing about hurting an empath is that eventually she stops explaining. That silence becomes extremely important because female empaths usually communicate deeply before emotionally disconnecting. They try to repair emotional distance. They try to discuss problems honestly. They try to save emotional connection through understanding. So when an empath becomes emotionally quiet, it usually means emotional exhaustion has already reached a dangerous level internally. Many men notice her emotional value too late because they confuse her patience with weakness. They assume she will always stay because she stayed through previous pain. But every painful experience quietly builds emotional boundaries inside her mind. Over time, she begins realizing that understanding someone's pain does not mean tolerating endless emotional damage. She begins recognizing the difference between helping someone grow and allowing someone to repeatedly hurt her. That realization changes her completely. Once a female empath emotionally detaches after repeated betrayal, the distance feels different. She no longer argues the same way. She no longer chases the same way. She no longer begs to be emotionally understood. Instead, she becomes calm in a way that feels emotionally final. Many men panic only after reaching this stage because they suddenly realize the empath stopped fighting for the connection. The emotional warmth they once relied on begins disappearing slowly. The emotional reassurance becomes less frequent. The emotional openness becomes guarded. And for the first time, the man starts feeling the emotional emptiness the empath carried alone for so long. But by then, the damage often runs too deep internally. Female empaths do not become emotionally guarded overnight. They become guarded after loving too deeply in environments that repeatedly punish their softness. One of the hardest things for a female empath to tolerate in a relationship is inconsistency. Pain hurts her, betrayal hurts her, emotional distance hurts her, but confusion slowly destroys her from the inside because mixed signals force her mind and emotions into constant tension. A female empath pays close attention to emotional patterns. She notices when communication suddenly changes. She notices when affection feels strong one day and emotionally cold the next. She notices when words sound loving but actions feel distant. Many men underestimate how exhausting inconsistency becomes for someone who feels emotions deeply. They think small behavioral changes will go unnoticed. But female empaths naturally study emotional energy without even trying. They notice delayed effort. They notice emotional withdrawal. They notice when someone becomes emotionally available only when it benefits them. This is why hot and cold behavior affects female empaths so intensely. One moment she feels emotionally connected, safe, and valued, and the next moment she feels emotionally confused without understanding why the emotional atmosphere suddenly changed. Her mind immediately begins searching for emotional clarity because emotional inconsistency creates emotional insecurity inside her nervous system. She starts replaying conversations, she starts analyzing tone changes. She starts wondering whether the emotional connection was genuine or simply temporary attention. Many emotional immature men unintentionally create this emotional chaos because they lack emotional stability themselves. Their feelings change based on mood, ego, convenience, or emotional availability. They may show deep affection during moments of loneliness, then suddenly become distant once emotional intimacy becomes real. A female empath notices these emotional shifts immediately because consistency matters deeply to her. She does not expect perfection. She does not expect constant excitement every second of the relationship. What she expects is emotional stability. She wants words and actions to match over time. She wants communication that feels emotionally safe instead of emotionally unpredictable. Many men fail to understand how important emotional reliability becomes for female empaths because emotionally sensitive people experience uncertainty more intensely than others. Inconsistent affection slowly damages emotional trust. Repeated emotional confusion creates anxiety. A female empath may continue loving someone deeply while simultaneously feeling emotionally unsafe around their unstable behavior. That emotional contradiction becomes mentally exhausting over time. Some men mistake this need for consistency as emotional neediness, but it is actually emotional self-protection. Female empaths understand how emotionally damaging unpredictability becomes after enough painful experiences. They know what it feels like to become emotionally attached to someone whose actions constantly shift without explanation. One day they feel chosen. The next day they feel emotionally invisible. That instability slowly breaks emotional trust because trust is not built through temporary affection. Trust is built through repeated emotional consistency over time. She notices inconsistency fast because emotional awareness is deeply connected to pattern recognition. A female empath remembers emotional behavior more than surface-level words. She remembers how someone made her feel repeatedly. She remembers emotional effort. She remembers emotional absence. She remembers whether someone showed up consistently or only during moments that benefited them emotionally. This becomes difficult for emotionally immature men because emotional maturity requires discipline, accountability, and emotional responsibility. Some men crave deep emotional connection while still behaving inconsistently because they have never learned how to maintain emotional stability. They disappear emotionally when life becomes stressful. They avoid communication during conflict. They become emotionally unavailable once vulnerability becomes uncomfortable. And female empaths slowly become emotionally drained trying to understand behavior that never feels stable. She can handle pain, but confusion slowly destroys her. That emotional truth explains why many female empaths eventually leave relationships that constantly force them into emotional uncertainty. Pain can at least be understood clearly, but confusion traps the mind in endless emotional questioning. A female empath keeps searching for emotional meaning behind inconsistent behavior because her emotional instincts know something feels wrong even when words sound reassuring. This creates emotional exhaustion because she keeps trying to emotionally connect with someone whose energy constantly changes. Some men accidentally manipulate female empaths through inconsistency without realizing it. Emotional unpredictability creates emotional dependency because moments of affection become emotionally addictive when mixed with emotional withdrawal. A female empath may start holding on to small moments of warmth while ignoring larger patterns of emotional instability. She keeps hoping consistency will return because she remembers how emotionally beautiful the connection felt during its strongest moments. But over time, emotional confusion slowly weakens even the deepest love. A female empath may continue fighting for emotional connection long after her emotional health begins suffering internally. Yet eventually, emotional exhaustion changes her perspective. She begins recognizing that real love should not constantly feel emotionally unstable. She begins understanding that emotional peace matters just as much as emotional intensity. She starts realizing that someone who truly values her emotionally will not repeatedly place her in states of confusion. And once she reaches that realization, her emotional attachment slowly starts weakening. That emotional withdrawal often shocks men because they mistake her patience for endless emotional tolerance. But female empaths eventually stop fighting for emotional consistency once they realize the other person is committed to emotional instability instead of emotional growth. And this leads into one of the deepest reasons many men struggle with female empaths. She sees people for who they really are. Female empaths often notice emotional truths long before other people do because they pay attention to energy, behavior patterns, emotional reactions, and hidden intentions beneath surface appearances. Many people survive socially by wearing emotional masks. They present confidence while hiding insecurity. They present kindness while hiding selfishness. They present emotional interest while secretly remaining emotionally unavailable. Around most people, these masks work successfully because society often focuses more on appearance than emotional authenticity. But female empaths naturally sense emotional contradictions. They notice when someone's words and energy do not match. They notice hidden motives behind behavior. They notice fake confidence hiding emotional emptiness. They notice emotional manipulation hidden behind charm. This makes many men deeply uncomfortable because being emotionally seen feels vulnerable in a way they are not prepared for. A female empath may not even say anything directly at first, yet emotionally defensive people often feel exposed around her presence. That is because emotional awareness creates silent pressure. Fake behavior becomes harder to maintain around someone who naturally studies emotional energy instead of surface performance. Some men become attracted to female empaths precisely because they feel emotionally understood in ways they never experienced before. But later, that same emotional awareness starts feeling threatening because the empath begins noticing the parts of them they hoped would remain hidden. She notices insecurity behind arrogance. She notices emotional immaturity behind charm. She notices selfish intentions hidden behind temporary affection. And emotionally dishonest people often react defensively once they realize the empath can see beyond the image they carefully created. Fake confidence does not impress her because female empaths value authenticity over appearance. She cares more about emotional honesty than social status. She cares more about emotional consistency than performance. She would rather connect with someone emotionally genuine than someone emotionally polished but emotionally empty inside. This becomes difficult for people who rely heavily on image, ego, or emotional manipulation to maintain relationships. A female empath naturally looks deeper than surface attraction. She wants to know who someone truly becomes during stress, conflict, vulnerability, and emotional difficulty. She watches how people treat others when nobody is paying attention. She watches how people respond to honesty, emotional responsibility, and accountability. Over time, patterns reveal character to her very clearly. That emotional awareness becomes powerful because many people spend years hiding behind emotional masks, even from themselves. A female empath unintentionally disrupts those masks because her emotional instincts keep recognizing contradictions. Some men become emotionally defensive around her because they fear being emotionally exposed. They fear their hidden behavior becoming visible. They fear emotional vulnerability because vulnerability requires honesty, and honesty becomes difficult when someone has spent years emotionally disconnected from themselves. You cannot wear a mask forever around someone who feels energy more than words. That emotional truth explains why relationships with female empaths often become emotionally intense very quickly. Emotional masks begin collapsing naturally around deep emotional awareness. A female empath may quietly sense dishonesty before evidence even appears clearly. She may feel emotional distance before communication changes openly. She may notice emotional selfishness long before other people recognize it. This does not mean female empaths are magically perfect or always correct. But their emotional sensitivity makes them highly aware of emotional inconsistencies many people ignore. Over time, this awareness changes how they view relationships completely. They stop being impressed by words alone. They stop trusting emotional charm without emotional consistency. They stop ignoring emotional intuition simply to maintain connection. And this becomes painful for emotionally immature men because female empaths eventually stop accepting emotionally performative behavior. They start valuing emotional peace more than emotional excitement. They begin protecting their emotional energy more carefully because repeated disappointment taught them painful lessons about people. The truth is, many men do not lose female empaths because those women were impossible to love. They lose them because emotional depth requires emotional maturity. Loving a female empath means entering a relationship where emotional honesty matters deeply. It means being emotionally consistent even when life becomes difficult. It means understanding that emotional trust is fragile around someone who feels emotions intensely. Many men are not emotionally prepared for that responsibility because emotional maturity requires self-awareness, communication, accountability, and vulnerability. A female empath does not expect perfection. She understands human flaws better than most people because empathy naturally creates understanding. But she struggles deeply with emotional dishonesty, emotional inconsistency, emotional manipulation, and emotional avoidance because those behaviors slowly destroy emotional safety. Many men initially enjoy the warmth, understanding, loyalty, and emotional depth female empaths offer. Being deeply loved by an empath feels powerful because their love feels emotionally genuine. But maintaining that connection requires emotional growth many people avoid. Eventually, emotionally immature behavior starts damaging the relationship slowly. The empath begins feeling emotionally lonely even while staying emotionally loyal. She begins feeling emotionally drained, trying to understand someone who refuses to understand themselves. She begins realizing that loving someone deeply does not automatically mean being emotionally safe with them. That realization becomes life-changing for female empaths because they often spend years overgiving emotionally before finally understanding their own emotional worth. And once a female empath finally realizes her worth, she stops chasing people who only loved her softness but could never handle her truth. That moment changes her completely. She stops trying to convince emotionally unavailable people to emotionally open up. She stops shrinking herself to avoid making emotionally immature people uncomfortable. She stops explaining her emotional needs repeatedly to people committed to misunderstanding her. Instead, she begins protecting her emotional peace. She begins choosing environments where her emotional depth is appreciated instead of criticized. She begins recognizing that real love should not constantly require emotional survival. Many men only recognize the true value of a female empath after she emotionally detaches completely because her absence creates a silence they never expected. The emotional warmth disappears, the emotional support disappears, the deep understanding disappears. And suddenly they realize how rare genuine emotional connection actually was. But by then, the empath has often already emotionally changed, not because she stopped loving deeply, but because she finally understood that being emotionally soft does not mean accepting emotional suffering forever. Some people enter your life and only hear your words, but a real empath feels the emotion behind every silence, every distance, and every hidden truth. That is why losing a female empath often becomes a regret people understand far too late. Her love is rare because it is genuine. Her loyalty is rare because it comes from the heart, and her emotional depth is rare because most people are too afraid to feel that deeply anymore. The world teaches people to hide emotions, avoid vulnerability, and protect their ego at all costs. But female empaths remind people what real emotional connection actually feels like. And for emotionally immature people, that kind of connection can feel overwhelming. So now the question becomes even deeper. Do you think emotional depth scares people today? And have you ever met someone who could truly see through you emotionally without you saying a word? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below because your story may connect with someone else watching this video right now. If you enjoyed this video and want more deep psychology, relationship truths, and emotional insight like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. Also take 1 second to like this video because it helps the channel reach more people who need these messages, and share this video with someone who would truly understand it. Sometimes one video can explain emotions people struggled to put into words for years.